And Rosemary drops the knife. Ruth Gordon picks it up and then she tries to wipe the spot off the floor. You know what I mean?
That part was funny. I did.
Yeah.
I was like, you know what, old people.
It's a New York apartment. You got to be careful, right?
Yeah.
We're bringing the apocalypse, but your hardwood floors can't get messed up.
Yeah, this is a security deposit. I mean, come on.
Welcome to episode 205 of Film Generations, where two guys from the 20th century select a classic movie to show a panel of young film lovers and see if it still plays for today's generation. I'm Mark Netter. I'm a filmmaker and an instructor at the Los Angeles Film School. I am co-founder and CEO of Electrocast Media. I'm
David Taussig. I directed a film called Hellfire about a guy that writes a symphony for the devil. It wasn't as good as Rosemary's Baby.
And I'm Grace Chapman, and I'm a film student at the Los Angeles Film School.
I'm Kylie LaRue, and I love movies.
Hi, I'm Guy Lewis, and I'm a recent graduate of the fine Los Angeles Film School.
Congratulations.
This past week, we watched 1968's blockbuster psychological horror thriller Rosemary's Baby, starring Mia Farrow, John Cassavetes, and in an Oscar-winning supporting actress performance, Ruth Gordon. It was from the novel by best-selling author Ira Levin, produced by William Castle, who was previously known for low-budget, gimmicky horror movies, and written and directed by Polish immigrant Roman Polanski. Rosemary's Baby tells the story of a newlywed that moves into a fancy old Manhattan apartment building with her struggling actor husband, and gradually comes to fear that her elderly neighbors may actually be more spooky than kooky, and that her career-obsessed husband may not be the man who actually impregnates her during the movie. As the walls close in on Mia Farrow's Rosemary, her terror grows. What exactly is the creature gestating inside of her womb? Considered a feminist metaphor upon its release, does that analysis still hold up? And does the film still send shivers down the spine 56 years later? Well, let's turn to our panel of young film lovers and find out. David, I'm assuming you have seen Rosemary's Baby before.
My best friend's mother, Gail Mazer, a very lovely poet, took us to see a double feature. So the first film was 10 Rillington Place. 10 Rillington Place. It's a British name. I don't think any of us knew. It's about a guy who had murdered all these women and piled up their bodies in the basement. And we sat through that. And, we knew the main attraction was Rosemary's Baby, so we didn't leave. And then Rosemary's Baby came on, I think, right around the middle of the devil rape scene. She said, okay, we're going. And I had to get up and go. She just felt so bad because we were like 11 years old. And
That was not when I saw it.
Yeah, so I saw it a few years later. It was a little scary. It didn't bother me. I was like, oh, this is getting good now, and we're leaving. But yes, that's first time.
Yeah, this was my third time watching it, I think. My mom showed it to me when I was in seventh grade, and it really scared me. She showed me all my friends, and none of us could sleep that night. But yeah, I really love this movie.
That's awesome, and I'm calling child services. Kylie, what about you?
And it's actually my first time watching it.
Oh, wow. And were you impressed?
Oh, yeah, very much so. Sometimes I get scared that all the hype of it being so amazing and all my friends giving it 5-star letterbox reviews will raise my suspicions of it. But no, it definitely delivered on it.
Guy, what about you?
This was the second time I saw it.
How did your second time differ from your first time?
There's certain scenes that I was looking forward to. For some reason, I love the phone booth scene. Mia Farrow, she's badass, I mean, she's really, that's a really good scene.
When she's in the booth, she's calling her previous gynecologist, trying to get him on the line. And everybody is trying to use the phone booth and putting more and more pressure on her. And she just looks, I guess, trapped inside there.
The time in the movie where she feels boxed in and she's literally in a box. Really, 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 really cool scene. Also, the lead name is Guy. That's kind of weird, Did
you relate?
I mean, would I let the woman I'm seeing be impregnated by the devil to make it in Hollywood? I mean, of course, everyone would do that, right? But I would be more open and honest.
What, you'd be like, honey, I've invited the devil over. He's going to sleep with you tonight.
Yeah, you met the devil before. You know, we know him. It's at the party. No, I would never talk to the devil, especially 2 days after Easter.
And I would never wear a shirt that has devils on.
Oh. Method fashion.
Yeah.
Okay, Grace. First time you saw the movie, we've learned about that experience. What were the second time like and this time?
I was anticipating a few scenes like Guy, especially when she's like totally pregnant, just walking through the streets, like about to get hit by the cars. That scene's always stuck with me since I saw it as a child. It's just so uncomfortable. You could sense how desperate she is.
Any other scenes that stood out to you this particular time?
When we first see the Castavets walking up the street, because at first you really don't suspect anything from them, but when you know what they are after seeing the movie and then you watch it again, and when they first appear, it's like really, really jarring, and all their bright colors.
When I first watched it, I honestly did think it'd be a lot gorier because everyone was like, it's going to terrify you. It's horrible, but no one ever wanted to spoil it. But I don't know. I assumed there'd be some weird, crazy birth scene, guts, blood, violence. And I think I was really shocked, but I also really appreciated kind of being spared that in a way and then delivered the horror through the ways that it is delivered in the movie. It sits with me a little bit deeper, knowing how normal the movie almost looks, except for one or two scenes that kind of allude to the phantasmical. But it's scary waking up and being like, this is just her normal everyday life.
Aside from the eyes of the devil and the scaly hands, there's only one scene that I can think of where there is actual gore, and it comes early in the movie. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Is it when she's getting her blood taken?
No, before that.
When the girl fell out she fell out the window.
The friend she made in the laundry room.
Yes.
I thought the special effects on that one was pretty decent, especially for the time.
That was the first moment that my friend's mother said, maybe I shouldn't have brought these 11-year-olds.
I mean, it's so compared to what we see today, it's almost like nothing, but it still feels shocking in the movie. And I think the reaction of the Castavets is hilarious because they're just sort of like, oh, okay. So what's the genre of this movie? If it wasn't a gore fest, is it really a horror movie, or what is really going on?
It's a horror thriller, I would say, just because the tension that it plays with is very thrillery. But I think the overall allusions to like the devil and just the deep fear strikes, especially in women, the thriller has the strongest undertones, definitely. But I think it's still a scary movie, definitely. Kind of like The Shining. It's not like, rah, jump out at you, but that tension like just like gets to your bones and like rattles them just enough to be scared.
And a little bit of like body horror too, just like knowing you're pregnant with the devil's baby.
It's such a big fear.
Yeah, it's bad enough when they come out and then you find out.
They're spawn of Satan. Oh no.
Can anyone help me out making the case that this movie is also a comedy? Am I way off base?
I'll have your back on that one since the young people won't. Ruth Gordon is fucking hilarious. And
that's something that was in Harold and Maude, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, she's adorable. She was adorable the whole movie. You know?
And there's comedy sprinkled throughout. It's like every time that Mia Farrow is asked, like, oh, your husband's an actor. What's he been in? Well, he was in Nobody Loves an Albatross, and he did a commercial for, which is kind of what it's like when people ask me what my film career was like. I have to, have you done anything I've heard of? And I have to tell them about things they haven't heard of. I found that actually kind of funny, but there's humor throughout the film. I mean, I won't say it's a comedy, but I will say in a really bleak way, it's a dark satire of what was going on in the 60s.
I can agree with that.
And I think that that's sort of what the horror is about. I think what's so interesting about this film is, ultimately the fear is, oh my God, the Antichrist is coming. The devil's having a child. But, there's none of this, well, when the Antichrist comes, then Armageddon will be elusive. There's none of that. There's like no talk about what might happen. You feel like the Antichrist is already kind of here and that she's just sort of experiencing like some kind of a deepening of what's already settling in all around her, which is the world kind of falling apart. She's alone. Nobody will believe her. She has no community. Time magazine says, "Is God dead?" People are committing suicide. It's just a very dark feeling that there's something going wrong. Maybe more than a comedy, it's like this deep social satire, which is not exactly funny, but it's about how the church has disappeared. People don't believe. There's only one person in the whole thing who really reads. I mean, Roman Castanet reads, but he's evil. Her friend who wants to help her is like, he reads books and he's saying like, I have these books and you should read them because there's this evil in the world you need to know about. Meanwhile, everyone else is just saying, like the Dr. Saperstein is like, don't read books. No pregnancies are alike. Don't take pills. Pills are no good. Make a good homemade brew out of, in your blender. It's reminding me a little bit of what I see going on now, that everyone's just making up their own belief system. And I think the roots of that are being investigated in this movie in the 60s.
Interesting. Grace, were you able to do some research on the times when the film was released? This might be a good time to bring that up since David's opened that Pandora's box.
So in 1968, it was a very tumultuous time in American history with all the social and political upheaval, civil rights and everything. But the feminist movement was also becoming more mainstream, and that's definitely seen in this film. There's many themes: women's autonomy, reproductive rights, and it just really highlighted the vulnerability of women in the 60s patriarchal society. And you could totally see all that in the film because she has like no control over her own body, even how she gets pregnant. She can't see the doctor she wants, and it just made me so angry the whole time how she had to just live with that.
I think that's the big horror of the movie yes, you're worried about the creature inside of you, but the dual horror is that pregnancy has removed her control of her own life.
Yeah.
I personally have not been pregnant.
Me either.
But there is a sense that, first of all, when you're starting to have a baby, when it's growing inside of a woman, everything is about the baby. And if you've been selfish your whole life, partying, going out, whatever, I've seen people change like 180 degrees because they really are concerned and taking responsibility for this life inside of them. But it also means a loss of, like you were saying, a loss of autonomy. And one of the questions that I had was, do you think this movie is still as resonant along those lines today? Or do you think women have more control over these situations than they did in 1968?
I guess it depends on what state they're living in, but it's definitely a mirror of today because Roe versus Wade was overturned. So it is kind of spooky how history is kind of repeating itself. But I think in some regards, women definitely have more autonomy. But at the same time, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
So I know in 1968, a woman could not get a credit card on her own. She had to have a husband or another man co-sign for her.
Mm-hmm.
And for purposes of credit, her income was discounted 50%.
Wow.
Yeah, that's until 1974, around the time of Roe v. Wade. And then
I don't want to quibble because you're basically right. But I mean, it's not that you couldn't have a credit card. It's that a woman's right to be treated the same way in applying for a credit card wasn't guaranteed by law. So for instance, a lot of banks, they discount women's income. They'd say, well, maybe they'll get pregnant, their income will go down. And so they wouldn't give them the full weight of the money they were making. Women did not have equal rights when it came to all kinds of things, including that. But it wasn't like you couldn't get a credit card. I mean, women had credit cards.
Does anyone know what year federally marital rape became illegal?
I don't even want to guess. Just tell me.
70 something, right?
I want to say the 80s.
Keep going.
95?
Close, very close. Yeah, I think it was 93. Was it?
93.
Oh my!
Some states had it, but it wasn't federal. She wakes up after she's been drugged, and she's been very clever, and she didn't eat all of the awful chocolate mousse, but she wakes up in the middle of sex, and they're like, just keep going. And then the next day, her husband says, yeah, I didn't want to miss the date when you were most fertile, so I had sex with you. And she goes like, while I was asleep? And she kind of brushes it off and moves on.
Yeah, that was disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
I felt so horrible for her then. I
Like,
think I would rather be with the devil, I don't know, than have it be okay that my husband can rape me, you know?
I just feel like in this movie, the say in her pregnancy stopped the moment she ate some of the moose. Like she had the day planned out, she wanted to do it great, and finally he like once the guy was like, "Yes, let's have a baby." Then every single decision made for her, from two OBGYNs, all being men, only until she had her friends over for that party did the women literally lock her in a room and be like, "What's going on? This is weird. Something's happening. Like, this shouldn't be like this." And then, she's immediately cut off.
And it's so great because it's the one moment in the movie where you feel hope. Oh, there's a chance she's going to be saved. But no. Okay, worst villain in the movie.
You mean like most evil or like weakest villain?
One you hated the most.
I hated Guy the most.
Me too.
And that is so weird to say.
No, he sells out his wife. The others are just witches. They're just, they have a really bad religion that they believe in. Really bad, but
in my opinion, religion's always bad. It's only your personal belief that's cool. But when people get together and they make decisions for groups of other people, that's always been bad. That's not religion in my opinion. That's control. But the reason why I think Guy is the biggest villain is he actually went against everything that husbands are supposed to do for their wives, right?
So Kylie, you did not weigh in on most evil. You didn't join the crowd battering poor John Cassavetes. So
well, I just wasn't sure, I guess, but I would have to agree, just because when they move into an apartment together and they're eating takeout on the floor, and then they make love on the empty floor with just takeout and like a lamp, and it's like, to move into a dream place and to do that, and then I guess, to just betray that person who like you love so much and you committed to so far in your career, who like supported you through everything, who always gave you all your credits and always supported you. She had nothing but raw, genuine love for him, and he just one dinner party, and he was like, "Oh, here we go."
I want to talk about that,
and crappy dinner too.
But I wanted to mention that scene that you're talking about when they've just moved in. She initiates sex. She says, "Let's make love." She has control at that moment, and he kind of takes off his pants in a funny way and stuff going on.
She has control. I think at the beginning of the film, she's the one who wants the apartment. Guy is really afraid. He says the apartment's kind of expensive. I don't know. He's a little worried about it. She really loves that apartment. She wants to have it. And, while I totally agree, he's completely the villain and she's an innocent victim of everything. But that moment, if you think about it, puts a little pressure on her husband to like make more money. And, does it in some way lead to what happens later on, where he feels like he's got to make it as an actor?
He's obviously very insecure. And then knowing that him as a man, his place in the world is starting to kind of dwindle from what it used to be. So he's like trying to like, in a way, overcompensate, but not say that, hey, honey, I can't afford it. I'm sorry. I love you though. Instead, he's like, I'll do it. And then sells her to the devil. And it's like, he could have just said no.
Seeing the film the second time, I thought, it starts off, it's kind of an equal marriage, and they're both manipulating each other. They both, there's a little conflict. She wants the apartment, he doesn't. It's the usual, it's the couple thing. They're both jockeying to get what they want. And once she gets pregnant, he totally gets the upper hand.
But I think the big turning point happens off camera, right? Which happens a number of times in this movie. But does anyone remember or can identify the point at which Guy first is considering the deal?
So I think it has to be when they were talking at the old couple's apartment.
Yeah. So
you walk in on the conversation that they're all into, that Guy and I can't remember the old guy's
Roman.
name. Roman, right? Roman, which I should be able to remember that because it's also the director's name.
I didn't even think of that.
That was my first thought.
It is, but I think that was his name in the book too.
Still, he kind of orchestrates everything.
Cool, right. And so I think that's the point that you really...
Yeah, I love that scene because Rosemary's in the kitchen doing dishes with Minnie. And several times in the movie, you get a shot where you can't see around a doorway. And that's one of the times where you see like that they're smoking in the living room, but before they go in, you like, what's really going on in there, right? It's a little bit of like curiosity.
You don't see them, you just see the smoke, and you hear them a little bit, but you can't really hear what they're saying.
And you go in there, and Guy seems like something's changed, right? Guy's kind of like leaning away from Roman, and he's clearly contemplating something. And I don't think he's 100% made the decision yet, but I think that it's entered his consideration set.
That's the moment where he's been given the pitch.
Yeah. And the moment that I think ends the first act of the movie is when the actor who got the lead in the play that he wanted the lead in has suddenly gone blind.
That was what proved it to him, was he was going to swap those ties. And if he actually went blind, then that proved the Cassavetes good on their offer.
Yeah.
So he's like, oh, this is real. So let's just keep going with it. Now I know they're legit.
When she calls the actor who was struck blind, there's a voice on the other end. Have you heard this anecdote?
Mm-mm.
The voice on the other end of the phone is Tony Curtis. And she had met Tony Curtis. She kind of knew him. So she calls. Nobody told her it was going to be Tony Curtis. Polanski did it because the whole time she's like wondering like what's going on. Like she kind of recognizes the voice, can't quite place it. And he liked what that brought out in her acting.
Yeah. Better known now as Jamie Lee Curtis's father.
Okay.
There's another really famous shot where Ruth Gordon goes into the bedroom to call the Satan gynecologist, Dr. Saperstein. And this is kind of a famous video clip you can find on YouTube. The director of photography, William Fraker, great DP, had lined up the shot so that you could see Ruth Gordon through the doorway, could see her face, could see her whole profile. And Polanski's like, no. He makes him move the camera so that her face is cut off and you can't see her face while she's talking. And Fraker said, we go to the premiere and 800 people in the theater at that moment go like this to try to see around the doorway.
Oh, wow.
There's a few times where they do that. And does anyone get Hitchcock vibes from it at all?
Oh, yeah. A lot of similarities, yeah.
And particularly the movie Suspicion, which is a similar theme. Husband gaslighting his wife.
So was there a creepiest scene in the movie for you guys?
For me, it's the cringe scene when she's sleeping with the devil. That's,
You know what I love about that? I mean, everything about that scene is great. It's so creepy, but the way the voices go out of sync, and so it feels to me so much like a dream when he does that. It's such a great little technique. When you're in a dream, you hear people talk, but you don't exactly, there's something off. You hear things, but I don't know if you see them being spoken. You know, it's an uncanny dream sequence. I've seen that dream sequence 4 times. Every time I feel like I'm watching a real dream. It's so hard to make something seem like a real dream in a movie.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I think mine is the phone booth scene. Just because she's like a pregnant lady who's very pregnant, like very obviously in duress, and it's a clear phone booth. Like anyone could look in there and be like, oh, why is this like 9-month pregnant lady freaking out? And she's acting all sketchy, going in and out and having like a panic in a phone booth in a public place by herself with a suitcase. I'm like, no one is helping her. Like that's what creeps me out. Is this everyone can see her, but nobody's helping her.
It's the New York City, you know, that you saw in Midnight Cowboy with the guy lying on the street and everyone just stepping over his unconscious body.
Yeah, no,
You
me.
know, it's like,
or, hey, I'm walking here. She crosses the street, pregnant, you know.
You know that Roman Polanski really made her do that scene. So,
Really?
Yeah, again, like, you know, they had a pretty good budget, but he's like, if we get stunt drivers and close the street, it won't look real. He puts Mia Farrow in a pregnant outfit. She's got, you know, a fake pregnant belly. And he says, nobody's going to run over a pregnant woman. Just step out on Fifth Avenue.
Wow.
And everyone said, you can't do that. And she said, okay, I'll do it. But then the cinematographer wouldn't step out. So Polanski grabs the camera himself and he follows her out in the street. And the two of them step out in the middle of Fifth Avenue. And sure enough, all the cars stop. They shot it a few times.
Well,
that's amazing. And by the way, the old guy who is waiting for outside the phone booth, that's producer William Castle, who had spent his whole life trying to do an A-list movie, finally did, and then promptly died of a stroke afterwards, which some people thought was the devil's work.
Wow.
He wanted to direct this movie Thank God he didn't get his way because he was a very low budget kind of B director. He made a film called The Tingler, which is this horror film about bugs or something. And as a gimmick, he put little strings on all the seats in the theater. And when the bugs would come out, they'd move the strings and tickle people's legs. So they'd feel like this icky feeling.
Wasn't there one where he had like a skeleton that went from the screen over the audience and everybody
just pops out of the screen into the audience? Yeah.
What do you think is the significance of Rosemary's haircut? Because that was like a big deal in publicity at the time. And her husband's reaction to it is less than sympathetic.
Well, speaking from experience, I tend to cut my hair when I feel like I'm losing control or I just need a change. So I think it was her way of like having some bodily autonomy. And I have to add that I used to model for Vidal Sassoon Salon. So I just thought that was fun.
Oh, that is awesome.
I was sad when she cut her hair. I did really like the little bangs. I thought they were so cute on her. But I was like, okay, you know what? She's got so much coming for her. Like, she needed that haircut. Being pregnant is weird enough for a lot of women. And then having that type of pregnancy with nosy neighbors. Yeah. Oh, I just, even without the Satan part, it's a hard thing to go through.
And the brutal heat, the humidity too. I'm sure she just wanted it off her neck. Mm-hmm. But I think she cut her hair in real life because Frank Sinatra cheated on her. Is that correct?
He filed for divorce for her on set.
Frank Sinatra served her divorce papers during the movie because he didn't really want her to do the movie. And then it went like 5 weeks over schedule because Polanski, was pushing it over schedule because he's trying to make a very special movie. Right. And so he said, you got to walk off the set, and she wouldn't do it. So he served her with divorce papers because he was a jerk.
But they were like May, December marriage anyway. I mean, it was crazy, the difference in ages.
Yeah, not a match made in heaven, I don't think.
I thought that was just like one of the hairstyles of the time. I get Breathless vibes and the similarities of the haircut. And I think Roman Polanski did a bunch of foreign films before this one.
It is kind of shocking halfway through it. I mean, she's such an innocent Midwestern kind of girl at the beginning. And then with that haircut, I mean, it was fashionable at the time, but considering how skinny she gets and everything, it kind of makes her look like some kind of victim.
Yeah, and she goes immediately pale, like early on in the film. A little bit disturbing.
I mean, her eyes are so big. I mean, sometimes I think she looks like shrimp.
What?
I'm like, get some tartar sauce for that later. Sorry.
She is great in this movie, though.
Yeah,
I love really
her. I think it's so cute.
Her father was from Australia and was a successful director during like the noir era and the 50s. And her mother, Maureen O'Sullivan, was one of the great beauties of Hollywood as an actress. Wow. And if you ever see Hannah and Her Sisters, the Woody Allen movie, because, Mia Farrow had this long relationship with Woody Allen that ended poorly, as many of us know. But Maureen O'Hara is in it as well and kind of plays a version of herself. Do you think that there was anything Rosemary could have done to save herself before the end of the movie?
I guess just leave.
Yeah. Or just
go away.
Kept her mouth shut to Dr. Hill. Like, why would he believe what she's saying? Like, she really upset me with that. I'm like, just say you don't trust your doctor and he'll take care of you. You don't have to go into all that Satanism stuff.
That drove me crazy too. I was like screaming at that. Oh.
Yeah, but the first thing that guy did was call her doctor.
That made me so mad.
Just to set it up, she goes to her previous gynecologist and she forces an emergency meeting with him at night. And she tells him the whole story of what's happening. And it sounds like you guys felt what I felt this time, which is like, oh, she sounds like a crazy person.
Yeah.
Yeah, she does.
It had me questioning, like, are they actually doing that stuff to her?
I can't blame that doctor, Dr. Hill, for not believing her. But the thing is, he seems very sympathetic and he does believe her. And then he says, this is terrible. Like, who is this doctor that's been doing these terrible things? And she says, Dr. Saperstein. He says, Benjamin Saperstein, who apparently is like one of the most respected OBGYNs in New York City. And when he hears that, that's when I think when he turns.
Well, that's when she's trapped for good. Like at that point.
I think she was doomed the whole entire time.
Yeah, what's she going to do? Run back to Columbus, Ohio and have the devil's baby?
Right.
Well, that's not going to be great either.
You never know where the devil came from, right? Is he living in that apartment building? Is he opening a portal in a hole in the earth? Is he just walking around New York?
Right. And in fact, you never really know if there is a devil. I mean, until the very, very end, she says his eyes. And so there's clearly something weird about this baby. Until that moment, you don't know for sure if there is anything supernatural going on or if it just seems that way and she's being a little paranoid. That's what's great about the movie is there's this tension.
I think the ending of the movie is super interesting. You know, it starts off where she opens up the closet and removes the shelves, and she decides she's going to go through the secret door that leads into the other apartment. Then she goes and gets the knife, and you think you're back in a real horror movie, right? And then she walks in there, and the couple is supposed to be off in Dubrovnik or wherever, and they're there. Everybody's there celebrating, and the baby is in a black crib covered with all kinds of darkness.
That crib was pretty cool, not gonna lie.
Yeah, for a goth couple, that's like the crib to give them.
So what did people think? Did they think that she was going to kill somebody? Did they think she was going to kill the baby or what?
I was hoping for some like female rage in there. For such a feminist forward movie, I was like, oh, got this big knife. Like, and they deserve it. They all deserve it. I thought she was going to be like, either it's like, I'm going to kill you all and take my baby, or like, I'm going to take my baby so you can't worship him anymore. Like, where was her motherly instincts and that rage and just being like, I'm not accepting this. And I just felt she just so accepted it in a way that almost frustrated me as, I don't know, a modern woman. It's just, I was just kind of ticked off by that.
I agree.
So why do you think she accepts?
Because that's her baby.
Yeah.
She's still a mom.
It's not the big feminist message you might get in 2024. But does it ring true, though, or does it ring false?
I think for the time it rings true because what is she going to do? Like, she's powerless without her husband. I feel like that was kind of her only option, was to just accept it or be killed by them or live miserably without her baby.
Is there any sense that she might actually not be 100% victim at the end by accepting the mother role, by taking control of the baby? Is there any sense that it's the only power move that she's got left, or am I off base?
Somebody, I think it might have been Roman, said like, respect her, that's his mother. So I think now that they know she's somewhat accepting of it, that they'll also protect her. So I feel like it kind of was her only option.
He did say she didn't have to join, just you could raise the kid. It's just like, oh my God, like I hate even accepting it too on her behalf. She wanted to be a mom so bad, and now she's raising Satan's kids. Oh, like it's
the scariest line to me is got his father's eyes, which is like hilarious and painful. But when she says, look at his hands, look at his feet. And I'm just thinking, oh, like cloven hooves.
Yeah, like what is she like? How? Oh,
yeah.
Like, what is this baby even gonna do? Yeah.
Oh, so Grace, you're for showing the baby.
Oh yeah. When they were approaching it, I was like, oh yeah, they're not gonna show the baby. What the heck? I really, really wanted to see the baby.
In your mind, did you see the baby?
Yeah, I did. He had like scary, messed up eyes, and I couldn't really imagine his hands or feet though. I didn't want to. I don't think it's a little disgusting.
I'll say I'm for not seeing the baby. I think you want to see the baby in your mind and not.
I think it is a more powerful way of doing it. I'm just so morbidly curious about Satan's baby.
But they do have I think it's a flashback to Satan's eyes.
It's in her mind a flashback to her dream when she saw the devil's eyes, which wasn't a dream, which is real.
Yeah, I'm pretty glad, I guess, that they didn't show it just because, like, the devil at that time, he didn't really strike me as scary in the scene where he's impregnating her. So I'm kind of glad, because if it was really B-level kind of special effects, I think it would have been like, just kill that baby. It's ugly. Or it would have been like, whatever, it's just some costume. It lets the quality be higher if it's imagined by you.
I kind of thought she was going to kill the baby. I was kind of expecting her to stab the baby if she wasn't going to kill those people.
I think the hardest thing about the ending that somehow I think works, and this is also where I get the comedy idea, the fact that they admit at the end that it's the devil, and they're, it's all these old people standing around going, "Hail Satan, hail Adrian, year one, and it's goofy, right? I mean, it's kind of goofy.
Especially when Rosemary drops the knife, Ruth Gordon picks it up and then she tries to wipe the spot off the floor.
That part was funny. I did.
Yeah.
I was like, you know what, old people.
It's a New York apartment. You got to be careful, right?
Yeah.
We're bringing the apocalypse, but your hardwood floors can't get messed up.
Yeah, this is a security deposit. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Ruth Gordon, by the way, she wins the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress, and she gives one of the most famous speeches of all time. She starts off by saying, "You have no idea how encouraging this is."
Right. After 70 years of being a working actress, she gets
her first movie that she was in as an actress was 1915.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And she was gorgeous. If you see pictures of her from back then, she has a modern kind of beauty. And then she ends up, her second husband is Garson Kanin, who's a theater and Hollywood guy. And they write movies together in the 40s. They wrote Spencer Tracy, Katharine Hepburn movie, Adam's Rib. They were good friends with them. And they say it's the movie that's most like their relationship in real life because Ruth Gordon and Garson Kanin really knew them. And so around this time, she has this weird renaissance where she comes back as an actress, as an old woman. And has any of you seen Harold and Maude?
I love Harold and Maude. It's a great flick.
Okay. It's basically about a disassociating rich kid who keeps trying to kill himself, but he's saved when he falls in love with Ruth Gordon, who's 60 years older than him or something, like 50 years older than him, some crazy number. And it was a movie that the studios didn't quite want to release.
There are a lot of mishaps that year with movie theaters. My grandmother heard it was, this is a good movie. She took me to see it at Radio City Music Hall. We saw the Rockettes dance and all that. The movie comes on, and then it's a movie about a guy who has sex with a woman that could be his grandmother. And my grandmother was so uncomfortable. Again, I was like 11, 10.
No.
I think I was 10 years old. I didn't really,
Did they actually do it, though? I thought they would just have a romantic relationship.
No,
well,
it's. I mean, you don't see it, but
off screen.
You see them afterwards in bed, and they're really loving and happy. Yeah.
Now I gotta watch it again.
Kylie, were you able to do any research on the making of?
Yes. The film is based on Ira Levin's book, Rosemary's Baby, published in 1967. And the film actually started filming after the long Roman Polanski delays in August of 1967. And it was released June 1968. So a really, really, really fast turnaround that coincided with the birth of the baby in the film, coincidentally. Wow. But basically, Polanski, Farrow, and Cassavetes, kind of the tried and true tale of a bunch of artists who didn't really get along and had very creative differences, but came together to make a good movie. So Polanski really did not like Mia Farrow, basically called her nuts in several different ways to cast, crew, and press, saying he just thought she was a kooky, crazy, cracked out counterculture woman. And the quotes go on and on and on about how she did not like her. Then
she was very kind about him. She really respected him and liked him.
I couldn't find one bad word she said about people on the set when I was looking. I didn't look super long, so maybe it's out there over time. But yeah, Roman did not like her. But also Cassavetes and Polanski also got into a lot of really, really vicious fights to the point where cast and crew thought a physical fight would break out because they had so many creative differences. They just, Cassavetes became, a very famous film director as well. So those power of the men titans directors at that time definitely clashed a lot as actor and director.
Do you think it was their different styles? Because I know Cassavetes' films, everyone's improvising all the time.
They feel like they're improvised. He actually improvised it in the writing, but he would always shoot.
Okay, but he liked to improvise. He liked actors to work out their own characters a lot. And I understand that Polanski was much more of he planned every shot to the last detail. So I wonder if that's what some of the arguments were about.
Yeah, I didn't find anything particular, but they clashed a ton. So that was obviously very difficult to work with. And then Sinatra would get her drunk during lunch, and she'd come back and then be stumbling on the set, and they had to take her to a dressing room and sober her up. And, Sinatra was very displeased that his wife had to have, a career of her own. And even Mia Farrow admitted that in a way she was like a teenager who was not ready for this marriage. There was no way it would have ever worked out.
Wow. Just like Rosemary.
Exactly. Yeah. So on set got filed for divorce while she was working. So that was interesting. But also Mia Farrow was very committed to the role, to not necessarily method act, but she's a staunch vegetarian. So that raw liver she's eating in the toaster oven reflection was real. And she broke her vegetarianism just to eat that, to really commit to the role.
Wow.
Creepy scene.
Yeah, very creepy and real. Yeah.
Guy, what was the reception like when the film came out?
Right. So the movie ended up being the number 8 movie of that year, the same year as 2001 Space Odyssey. So Space Odyssey did 56 million. Rosemary's Baby did 33 million.
Whoa.
That year.
Didn't Space Odyssey cost like 40 million and this cost like 3 million?
Yeah. So yeah. Yeah, this was a $3 million movie. And it was basically just loved.
Yeah. The Mad Magazine parody. I think the baby at the end is Alfred E. Newman.
Yeah. Rosemary's Boo Boo, which is the Mad Magazine parody.
And also Ira Levin had said he liked the name Rosemary because of the Virgin Mary.
Yeah, you definitely got the Madonna horror thing going on for sure. And the youthfulness compared to the other women in there.
Now, David, there is so much to say about director Roman Polanski, who is not stepping foot back into the United States before he dies, I don't think.
No, given that he's 90 years old now, I don't think he'll ever come back.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about where he came from and went to?
He was Polish, and he was 6 years old when the Nazis invaded Poland. So it put him in the middle of some of the worst horrors of the 20th century. His family was Jewish, and they were forced into a ghetto in Krakow. His pregnant mother was taken to Auschwitz and killed in the gas chambers. And his father was taken away to a work crew. And he was wandering around homeless, watching people get shot all around him. He saw a lot of atrocities by the time he was 7. And he was taken in by a Catholic family of peasants who were living in what he describes as medieval conditions out in rural Poland. One time, a priest said, "You're not really Catholic." And he felt certain that they were going to execute him and the family that had protected him because it was a capital offense to hide a Jew. Somehow did survive World War II. His father ultimately survived too. And he had a really deep understanding, I think, of this feeling of paranoia that pervades Rosemary's Baby. He really lived through it for his entire childhood. Even before he was 6, before the war happened, he loved movies. And then when the war ended and he was able to see them again, he decided that's what he wanted to do. His favorite film was Odd Man Out, directed by Carol Reed, who also did The Third Man, which we covered last year.
Another thriller.
Yeah. And he said a lot of things he learned from Odd Man Out he used in many of his films. In 1962, he made a Polish film called Knife in the Water, a thriller which has been remade several times, whether admittedly a remake or just a ripoff.
It's basically a love triangle on a sailboat, black and white.
With a killer on the sailboat. It was an international hit, and it was the Oscar nominee that year in 1962 for Best Foreign Film. That got him 3 films in Britain: Repulsion with Catherine Deneuve, Cul-de-sac, and then a kind of a wacky film called Fearless Vampire Killers, which was a parody of vampire films starring Sharon Tate. He married her. They were both pretty young. This is now 1967. He was invited to Hollywood to make Rosemary's Baby, essentially. It was a little roundabout, but that's the way it worked out. He was shown the book of Rosemary's Baby. He read it in one night and said, I got to do this, and wrote the script in like 3 weeks. They shot a bit on location in New York, and they went to Los Angeles to finish all the interiors. And he rented a house near his friend Jack Nicholson. And his wife, Sharon Tate, was murdered in the house by the Manson family. Tragically, along with 3 other people. And it affected him. And he said many times that, living through the Holocaust and everything he went through there, he was a child and he kind of accepted it. But he said something about having his wife murdered really changed him, and he couldn't trust anybody after that. And he said he became a changed man. But in 1971, he directed a very dark version of Macbeth with naked witches and all that. He did a strange film in 72 called What? I mean, it's a little out there. And then in 1974, he did maybe his best film, Chinatown. And it's really right up there with Rosemary's Baby, certainly. Yeah. Great film. Kind of revolved the film noir genre. I won't go through his whole filmography, but he did The Tenant in 76. It's a very paranoid film, very psychological. Anyway, the 800-pound gorilla in the room when you're discussing him is always, he admittedly slept with a 13-year-old girl in 1977. He pled guilty to illegal sexual congress under the terms that he'd be given a probationary sentence. And then the judge, who was really a publicity hound, said the day before the sentencing, I'm going to sentence this guy to 50 years in prison. I don't care what deal they made. So Polanski fled the country. France and Switzerland and various countries he's visited in Europe see a problem with the way U.S. justice was carried out and won't extradite him. So there you stand. So people have very strong opinions about this subject, obviously. A documentary was made by Marina Zenovich in 2006. It goes into the details if anyone's interested in getting the whole story. He was expelled from the Academy, but before that, he won some Academy Awards for The Pianist.
The Pianist is about a guy who's hiding from the Nazis in, I think it's kind of slightly autobiographical, I think, you know. And it's an incredibly powerful movie. And Adrian Brody won Best Actor for that as well. So I highly recommend it. I was saying to David, the problem with doing Rosemary's Baby is we're trying not to duplicate directors, at least not too quickly. So, you know, it means we can't do Chinatown, at least not in the near future. Yeah.
But we'll do it.
Find
we'll
a time.
To Chinatown.
All right. So I think it's time for us to rate this movie. 4 stars is an A+, a movie that's not only great, but touched you personally. Might be in your top movies of all time. 3.5 stars is an A. 3 stars, typically an A-, an interesting movie that maybe could be a little better. Then you got your Bs with 2.5 stars being a B+, and a B- at 2 stars. And then I'm assuming none of us are going to be rating this lower than that.
This movie is a really good study in tension, how to raise tension throughout a film. I mean, it was like pretty constant and steady. Just really, it's a really cool how he did it. So yeah, so if you're like a horror fan or just a person alive, you should watch this movie. And I give this 3.5.
Nice. Kylie, how about you?
I would probably recommend this movie to anyone who maybe has some dealings or issues previously with a church of some sort. I think it might kind of almost give a cathartic view to religion, but also kind of like affirm some warnings or heedings they might have felt while in a church. But also I would recommend it to women, just because I think, especially now post the retraction of Roe v. Wade, I think it kind of will evoke a new emotion in you, knowing that, you know, in some places where you live, like Grace said, you could possibly be victim to other people controlling your body. And this obviously is a different way of taking that control, but I think it's something that could kind of make you think to a bigger picture. But yeah, I would give this movie 3.5 stars. It is almost perfect to me.
Grace, weigh in.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I would also recommend it to any like misogynistic men who are trying to control women's bodies or just women in general. I think it would be a good wake-up call for them. Also just women in general, and then any like horror fans. And I would also give it a 3.5. Yeah, it's almost perfect for me too. I don't like the negative portrayal of witches.
Standing up for friends of Adrian.
Well, I think they should have been called Satanists, not witches.
Good point. David, your turn.
I'm going to give it 4 stars.
Wow.
Yeah, it's different than other 4-star movies, in my universe, but I think it's probably in the top 5 horror movies of all time, in my view. So that's pretty high company. I think the movie is kind of also perfect. There just aren't any missteps. Like from the beginning to the end, it's just good. It's entertaining. It's rich. It's full of ideas. It's full of great technique. It's not made in an obvious way. I mean, Guy was so right about the way the tension is always there. But having seen the film 3 times, I can't describe to you exactly how he builds the tension. It's almost like a magical feel. I just think this guy living the way he did for so long in such fear and being little and seeing this big world around him of bad things going on just had internalized the sense of dread, of paranoia, of fear so much that just something came out of him that's unconscious and hard to replicate. I think it's really special. The techniques he uses are really his and they really work. That's to me why it's a 4-star movie. And I just think this movie can work for so many different people. It's not for everybody, but I'll tell you that I watched it with my wife, April, and she doesn't love all the movies that I love, and she loves this movie as much as I do. I think it definitely works for women. It works for people of horror. It works for people who love suspense and psychological films. It works for people who like a good yarn, who like a mystery. So it just works on all those levels. It's also got this kind of gritty, we've done a lot of New York films. It's a good portrayal of New York in 1968. And, I love that the Dakota is in it, this building. You really get a feel for that building, which is a real building. So all that works. So anybody who can appreciate those things, I'd recommend it to.
I keep going back to seeing those scratches on her back from the devil. And I was thinking, like, if you did that today, those scratches would be like a lot deeper and you'd see a lot more blood. And it felt almost like soft, But there's something insidious about the movie. And there is something about how it burrows into the subconscious and you think about it for days afterwards. And I also think it's unusual in kind of the history of Hollywood movies, particularly at that time. The movie's made by men, right? Male writer, director, male author of the novel, male producer, but it actually feels very strong female point of view. And the fact that Grace and Kylie, the two of you, have embraced it so much, I think there's something very special about what they did. I mean, I would love to see a version directed by like Lynn Ramsey or, who I think is like an amazing Scottish female director. But there's something about it that is just, it really defines a certain era. And Dave and I had a little argument before about whether or not it's actually a feminist movie. It certainly is not a triumphal feminist movie. It's not one that at the end gives you the happy, oh, girl power, we succeeded and we beat the patriarchy. It's much deeper than that, and it's more difficult, but super entertaining. And when David said just now, top 5 horror films, I mean, look, I don't think David and I are horror experts. We haven't seen all the George Romero movies or all the new horror movies that are coming out and all those kinds of things. I mean, I have a son who sees every horror movie. And when I showed this to him a few years ago, he was blown away. And he was like watching Saw when he was like 11 years old. So,
Mark, you're a terrible parent.
We had Netflix. We didn't know. We're like, what are you watching? So for me, it's a 3.5-er. And I think really well deserving. And I almost like it better today than I did when I finished watching it 2 nights ago. To see something that actually resonates, and not only resonates a few days later, but resonates 56 years later, that's kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, I think about Rosemary's Baby a lot.
I don't know that there's been a better gaslighting movie ever made. That is so brutal and really gets you in its clutches. And when you think about what Polanski went through as a child in the Holocaust with, the Nazis taking over, isn't the movie even a bigger metaphor for fascism in general?
When you talk about gaslighting, I think if you talk to Polanski, he'd really make reference to the communist period after the war when he lived in Poland. He escaped Poland to get away from the gaslighting of Soviet propaganda that he had to live under.
Guy, how do we do on the average there?
So it's 3.6. So averages out to be 3.5 stars.
3.5 stars. Right on, right on. Anyone have any last thoughts before we close up?
Yeah, I was hoping we was going to get a chance to talk about this scene where she was walking through the secret door with the knife, where she's moving forward and the camera's pulling back, and you see the hallway. That is also a remarkable shot.
I also want to mention very little scoring in the movie.
Mm.
Yeah, I noticed that.
He's not trying to force you to feel things.
Yeah, he doesn't rely on any of the easy gimmicks. He really, he finds, I think, a very truthful way into conveying this material.
Yeah, the only one that I remember is like it's the music that's being played in the phone booth. It's a strange and odd score, but yeah, that's the only one I can really remember.
Yeah, I think it is trying to make you feel as like normal as possible. Like it's just your everyday life. You wouldn't really have all this music playing besides your record player, so it's kind of gaslighting even from like that post-production sense. It's just your everyday life. What's weird about it?
Yeah, I did feel like I was being gaslit as a viewer for sure.
Yeah, you are. That's right. You are. That's really a good point.
Yeah. All right, guys. If you want to watch Rosemary's Baby, it is streaming for free with a Paramount Plus or Fubo subscription and available to rent on a number of services, including Apple TV, Vudu, and YouTube. Speaking of YouTube, you can find Film Generations there with clips and stills and on audio wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. If you like our show, please tell your friends, rate and review it so that others can find us as well. Film Generations is an Electric House production. I'd like to thank our panelists, Grace Chapman, Kylie LaRue, Guy Lewis, and, of course, my co-host and our producer, David Tauzik. Executive producers are myself, Mark Netter, and Peter Rafelson. Our editor is Marcus Campito. Please join us for our next episode when we keep it dark while dialing it back a couple decades to what many believe to be the epitome of a classic film noir, starring Robert Mitchum, Kirk Douglas in only his third movie, and Jane Greer as the ultimate femme fatale in Jacques Tourneur's hard-boiled 1947 tale of lust and betrayal out of the past. Will our panel of young film lovers fall like a ton of bricks for this flick or pump it full of lead? Find out here on Film Generations.
Electric acid.